So Maurice is going to speak for a little bit, and then what we're going to do is we're going to engage in a bit of a discussion and ask some questions. So can I just take this opportunity to invite a very good friend of the community, Maurice Glasman.
There you go, good start. Good evening, everyone, and I'm really honoured and very pleased to be here. I'm not going to pretend that I'm from South London. I'm from the frozen north, Hackney, and areas like that. I didn't actually cross the river, I think, until I was in my mid-20s, to give you some idea of the divisions in London. And I'm from community organising, from London Citizens, where I've been working for many years, mainly on the living wage campaign. So anybody here from Wandsworth Council, I think it's about time that you attended to that. But also in recent times, you know, you say you believe in better. What I've learned over my life working, particularly with faith communities, is it's genuinely taught me to really believe in miracles, that things, the transformation of things, the mixture of the mundane and the magical coming together, the relationship between unexpected combinations of things. And I think that, you know, a child born in a manger, completely transformative of the world, a man with a vision in Mecca, whose message is everywhere throughout the world. These are the big miracles, but the miracles that I see every day and that we should value and treasure are the miracles that things that are divided can be brought together, and the energy that comes from that division can be transformative. And I think for those of us who have seen religious divisions, ethnic divisions, and racial divisions, to see the possibility of the genuine relationship between atheists and Muslims, between Catholics and Protestants, whoever thought that would happen in our lifetime. These transformations are at the heart of it. And I almost make up, you've had a Christian speaker, you've had a Muslim speaker, I almost make up the three-card trick, because I'm from the Jewish community in North London. That's where I come from, and our saying is to seek the peace of the city, because in its peace you will find peace. That's the guiding thread that certainly has worked in my life. If you give and you try to find peace, prosperity, energy in the city, if you can give, then what you get back, I mean, the incredible miracle that you're looking at is someone who's only ever got into trouble for the last 20 years was made a lord. There you go. There's a miracle that you can look at, and on that basis, really, just to say that, you know, in the daytime, I'm now a Labour peer, and I have to think about things like strategy and winning elections, and it's just so wonderful to be here. At night I can return to being a community organiser, and it's a lovely feeling. So I'm absolutely speaking for myself and feeling the full pleasure of that and being with you. And what I really wanted to share with you was just a few reflections, one of which is just to say of change and of tradition, of how we used to think of change, certainly for those of us who come from the left, we used to think of change as overcoming tradition, as overcoming faith, of creating a kind of secular, rational space. But now I think we've got to learn from faith communities. We've got to learn from the traditions of care, traditions of association, traditions of compassion. Father Delroy, I actually have attended your church on a Sunday, if you remember. I attended, and you can feel the transformation. You can feel real change going on in the room. People going from the mundane to the holy, discovering their better selves, discovering each other. Unbelievably powerful thing. And in London Citizens, it was just brought down to me all the time when we were doing the living wage work. We used to say, How many from the mosque? They'd say 40, 40 would turn up. How many from the church? 50, 50 would turn up. We'd say to the trade unions, how many from you? They'd say 30, no one would turn up. This was the story that, and a real story, and it happened again, and then it turned out that they were paying their dues by direct debit, and so we had this mad scene where we were trying to cancel their debit because they didn't turn up, and they, were continuing to pay, but they weren't turning up. And that's another bit of Jewish tradition I can share with you. Is Woody Allen said 98% of life is showing up, is actually going out and being there. And I think that there's, we will not change the world behind our computer screens. I know that Malik mentioned Twitter and Facebook. It's face-to-face human relationships that are transformative. It's being there with other people, it's being open to other people and not being afraid to be yourself. It's allowing the possibility of that relational change. And working within traditions that we know, traditions that we trust, and traditions that in their antiquity, in their ancientness, can be completely transformative and necessary for us now. One thing I'll share with you, a story I'll share with you from my community, from the Jewish community, is an interesting one that I've been thinking about, and I just wanted to share it with you. So in the Jewish schools, I'm now Lord of Stoke Newington and Sandford Hill. It's the biggest concentration of Orthodox Jews left in Europe. And what do they do with their citizenship? Well, what they do with their citizenship is that the children in the schools, for between 4 and 8 hours a week, go and visit old people. They go and visit, they're assigned an old person, often an isolated old person, a person whose family have left, whose husband or wife may have died, and they cook for them, and they clean with them, and they talk to them, and that's their citizenship work, is to go to those old people. And it's completely incredible to see. I'll take you up there, Malik, to have a look at it. It's transformative. Old people who were dying get a new lease of life. Relation, just having someone to talk to, just having a person you can talk to. I can honestly, when I talk about miracles, I've seen the lame walk, I've seen the ill become well, they've got weddings to go to, they've got birthday parties to go to, they've got suddenly, I read this report on in the Lords, you get all these reports, this report on mental illness came in. Very scientific, lots of data, lots of things. What are the three main causes, they said, of depression? Why have we got this huge depression? We've got 250,000 children on antidepressant drugs. This is something of a calamity. We go to the medicalization of unhappiness when clearly we know another truth, which is that huge amount of relational. And the conclusion is, what is the cause of depression? Well, it seems to be that the people who are depressed say the three causes are isolation, powerlessness, and disappointment. And I think that institutions such as yours address this issue of powerlessness. Because there are three types of power that we've got to look at. There's money power, and we know about money power. It works seemingly through voluntary contract. We agree, we exchange between hands for equivalence, but concentrated money power leads to the concentration of resources in few hands, the ability to impose your will politically and economically on other people. And we call that money power. I think in London we've got to call that the City of London and the Corporation of the City of London, which is, in another little miracle, the protesters didn't know where they were, but they stumbled upon St. Paul's Cross by St. Paul's. Now, St. Paul's Cross was the site in Anglo-Saxon times where at the ringing of the cathedral bells, the ealdorman or the alderman and the free citizens of London would come and meet and discuss. This is the oldest democratic practice in our country. It's the foundation of the Corporation of London, the foundation of Parliament, this democracy. And the protesters came across it and they said, my goodness, we are here at this most ancient democratic space, and yet the institution which it founded, the Corporation of London, is entirely devoted to the interests of the financial sector, to the interests of money. That's the financial power. And then we need change, and we need real change with that. That's the financial power. Then there's another power, which certainly those from my tradition are much more reluctant to talk about, which is state power. State power, which turns you to a unit of administration, a client, an isolated problem. That is the form of state power which works through coercion, which works through prisons, which works through courts, which works through the use of resources to impose forms of order. So you've got money power and you've got state power. And then we've got this other thing, and that's relational power. That's the power that people have when they associate with each other. And Pat, I really got the point of what you were saying. The transformative power that comes when people can actually meet, talk. That chair on the estate is the St. Paul's Cross of that estate. It's the place that people can meet and find some solidarity with each other, find some sparks of energy, find some courage to try to address the things that are causing them pain. In other words, what we've got to call what we're doing is doing politics. This is what politics is. It's the way you protect the people and the places that you love from harm. And there was a very, very radical word associated with this relational power. We used to call it, democracy, but I don't want to go too far in the sort of ideological agenda. But that form of relational power is what we need to establish. And what we know is that the divisions confronting that relational power, part of it is to do with being isolated, sitting at home watching television. Another one is that we can be isolated within our communities and not talk to others outside of that. And to break down those divisions and create genuine relationships with each other is the way that the power of local communities, I believe, will be transformed. So I thought that the film was extremely interesting, and I agreed with really a great deal of it. And part of what I agreed is that we mustn't reject this move to what's called the big society, but the big society is a very, very, very thin and abandoned baby. It's not big at all. And one of the reasons it's not big at all is that it's not anywhere near conservative enough, and it's not anywhere near radical enough. It doesn't engage with the energy and is very suspicious of the energy of faith communities, but it's also cannot confront, while it has this critique of state power, it still cannot confront the domination of market power, of financial power, and of money power. And it is always absolutely necessary to do both. So one of the things, two big things that I'd like to share with you that I learned from my community organising days, which I still can't quite believe are over. The first is to share sort of the closing thought, Pat's closing thought with you. And the way that we put it is just in 3 words: relationships precede action. That this idea that you can be a leader and have no followers, the idea that you go out into the world, you put up a blog, you put up a hate blog, you put up a petition, all of that doesn't matter. The idea is you can only bring change when you bring people with you, when you talk to people, when you can only be a leader if you have followers. And so relationships precede action. We must find the time to talk to other people, to create a genuine and get a sense of where they are. And that's and this idea that relationships precede action is a really, really very very important one, I think, for how we work. So I'm going to finish quite soon, not quite yet, but what I'm going to ask you to do as my request to you when I finish, just to warn you, is this one-on-one, is this one-to-one thing, is genuinely having a conversation with someone who isn't you, who you don't know, who isn't from where you're from, and to have a conversation with them. And at the end of it, that's what I'm going to ask you to do, and I'll sort of suggest the question at the end. But I wanted to share with you this idea that it's trust in another person, it's genuinely knowing another person, it's finding ways of connection with others that is the vital wisdom that we need. But let's just talk about this idea of relational power for a moment, and what I'm talking about there, and the new 3 R's, as I call it. What am I actually proposing? Because the other thing I wanted to say to you is the price of successful action is a constructive alternative. If people turn around to you and say, so what would you do? And you go, well, that's nothing to do with me, that's up to you. It's never gonna work out. And the enormous work that you have to do, Malik, you are aware of this, the enormous work of organizing of this work is for us, for you, to be able to find a way that you can be united in a constructive alternative, in a new type of agenda. But that means that requires, as Pat was alluding to, multiple real leadership from within communities, not singular leadership, but genuine courage and boldness from within communities in pursuit of new agendas. So what is my constructive alternative? What am I trying to pursue? What I'm trying to pursue is precisely what you're trying to pursue, which is the common good. But the common good is something that is negotiated between people. It's not an existing end. It's something dynamic that emerges from the unique people that come together and form this community. We are living in unprecedented times. Augustine, the great Christian thinker, spoke about a community of fate. How did we all get here? How did you all get to Wandsworth? Each of you has got a story that brings you across the country, across continents. It's an extraordinary story, but here you are. The big lie, I think, of globalization is that they will tell you that place doesn't matter. You can be anywhere. You've got the computer, money moves, people move, but we've got to find a way of asserting the human power of association and relationships in defiance of this endless churn to make the place habitable, to make the place livable. These are the vital things that we've got to do. So what are the 3 R's? I would say that the first thing is in relation to policing, in relation to mental health, in relation to schooling, in relation to work, that relationships are primary. It's not the aims, it's not the objectives, it's to harness the energy that comes from human connection, the trust that comes, the love that can flow, the innovation, the creativity that flows, the transformation that flows from relationships. So the other 3 words I'll say to you is relationships are transformational. That's the key. It's not ideology, it's not programs, it's not resources, it's actually people working together. So the primacy of relationships. But we know that not all relationships are good. There are abusive relationships. There's domineering relationships. So what's the other? What's the second concept that defines the good relationship? And that is reciprocity. Reciprocity is the idea that you give and you take. That you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. It's not a market exchange. It's not a form of redistribution. It's a form of relationship through time in which you catch people when they fall and they catch you when you fall. So reciprocity, some form of reciprocal equality of give and take, this is the crucial form of a good relationship. And then there's a third element. There's relationships, there's reciprocity, and then there's responsibility, which is absolutely vital to any conception of power. It cannot be that you do not take responsibility for yourself and others. It cannot be that we are complete victims of circumstance. There is responsibility is an aspect of love. Responsibility is an aspect of full human dignity. So reciprocity is the condition. So relationships, reciprocity, and then responsibility will be the transformational power at work, I think, in ensuring that it's not the case that the educated boss about the uneducated, which I think is probably as good a definition of New Labour as you could possibly get, but don't quote me on that and definitely don't Twitter it. But it was the way that people with degrees, particularly PPE degrees from Oxford University, could walk into any situation and boss people about and tell them what to do. The rule of the expert, the rule of the Harvard business graduate in the corporation. Now, we live in an extraordinary time. The 2 great gods have failed, I think, that have guided us for the last 60 years, the god of the state and the god of the market. We believed in both. Many of us, after 1945, thought that a well-funded welfare state run by very clever people who knew what they were doing, that would lead to a complete transformation of the lives of people. And it did lead to a transformation of the lives of people, mainly the people who were paid by the state, but there were good outcomes that came from that. And we also believed that the market, the free market, unregulated, would lead to prosperity, would lead to liberty, would lead to a general improvement in the conditions of our lives. Now, I think that following the crash of 2008, there's a mighty reckoning going on here. So we can't go back, and the truth is that all we have is each other. That is the truth of our existential truth of our lives now. We are here, and we find our strength, and we find our goodness through each other, and so it must be that there must always be negotiation, there must always be partnership, that it's the end of the concept of the client and the consumer. You know, when you're in the market, you're a consumer. When you've got state services, God forgive us, we try to talk about a client relationship. I'm a lecturer now, reader at university, and my bosses were always saying, we have to treat the students like customers. And I'd say, well, when was the last time you failed someone who bought a pair of shoes? You know, and they'd say, well, you know that's not what we mean. And I said, I don't know what you mean. And because there's been a loss of vocation, a loss of tradition, a loss of excellence, internal goods. So concerned were we with equality, diversity, inclusivity, and accessibility that we forgot about the internal goodness of human relationships, of skills, of excellence, of vocation, and we've got to call it what it is, of virtue, of being good and doing good in the world, and the centrality of that to the generation of real value. So when it comes to these issues, when it comes to this issue that you mentioned with policing, the analysis I would put forward is this is a crisis of human relationships, and they've got to be rebuilt one-to-one on the basis of responsibility, of reciprocity. That's the way ahead. When it comes to relational welfare, when it comes to mental health, the necessity of one-to-one care, not as a series of 7 one-to-one sessions with a counsellor, but faith communities, medical communities, giving the priority to conversation.
Community Empowerment Network, we're very bad. Yeah. We have incredible...
Of people being given support in their lives so that those lives can be genuinely transformed by others. So, as you could probably tell, I could go on, but I think it's probably enough said. So, I really want to honour Malik very, very, very much. Where I come from, you're called an organiser and not a director. In as much as what Malik does, what an organiser does, is it brings together people who would never meet. You bring together people who would never meet, and then you see how it goes. You create what would be inconceivable. You combine the unexpected, and for that magic that you bring, I'm sure that the legacy in Wandsworth will be very, very enduring. And I'm very, very, very keen in the next 10 years on working with you, on engaging with you, in seeing how those transformations work out. Because if this place can be transformed into a place of virtue and of goodness, if the human relationships in Wandsworth could be redeemed in that way, then really the blessings to the whole of it. If it can be done in Wandsworth, I think it can be done anywhere. That's my genuine view. And therefore it must be done in Wandsworth, because that's the nature of the political miracle that is your vision. So what I would really ask you to do, and this is, I just ask you with all humility, is to find someone you don't know, to get up out of your seat, find someone you don't know. What is the question? I think the question that you should ask each other, when you've obviously introduced each other, tell each other your names, that's really important. Maybe the question you could bring for the discussion is, what I've said, is there anything in what I've said that you really disagree with, or you'd like to know more, something like that, so that you know that I'm quite used to taking criticism, so I think I can take some more, and just have a conversation about how you can how you can build a relational culture in the place that you worship, in the place that you work. Okay, so thank you very much indeed.
Right, so we're going to do that for about 5-10 minutes. You'll know at the Community Empowerment Network we're very bad.
Yeah.
We have incredible